New players to Dungeons & Dragons typically get into the game with the 5th edition because it is the most recent edition and has been around since 2014. I think one of the problems with the 5th edition is that the majority of the official published adventures from Wizards of the Coast are long-form, big hardcover book campaign settings, and I think that's given new players the idea that all of D&D has to be this long, epic thing where you are going through a huge, story. But that wasn't always the case. Back with first edition, adventure modules were published from anywhere from 32 to 64 pages. They were short. They were designed to be played in 3 to 4 sessions. And that's how things were. Right up through 3rd edition, you still got, small, easy to handle, complete stories done in just 32 to 64 pages. 3rd edition did start to introduce longer things like City of the Spider Queen, the first adventure path by Piazzo, the Shackled City came out for them, but those were atypical. Typical was short adventures, and back in the 1st edition days, you would get anything from a straight up dungeon crawl. You could have complete stories done in 3 to 4 sessions with this, an actual story happening. But they did also create something new for the time that established a long-form campaign. Let's talk about that. So in the late years of the 1970s and the very early years of the 1980s, TSR, the original company that ran Dungeons & Dragons, published a series of modules that they labeled the G series, the D series, and the Q series. The modules in this series could all be played individually, but they were also designed to be played in order, G1, 2, 3, D1, 2, 3, and Q1, to give you a much bigger storyline. Here they are here, except for Q1. I don't have that one. G1, 2, 3, now known as Against the Giants, featured you in each one of these modules, going up a particular type of giants, hill giants, fire giants, etc. And in the first 2 modules, it was hinted at that there was some other force, some other influence that was getting these separate giant tribes together to attack and force the human world. In G3, we finally find out that source is the Drow. And at the end of G3, players actually got to encounter Drow for the first time ever in D&D. Not the first time the Drow are mentioned. The Drow are actually mentioned in the monster manual, but they're mentioned in the entry for Elf as a legendary creature, and really no other information. Official stat blocks for the Drow don't actually appear until the AD&D Fiend Folio. But they do have stat blocks for the Drow in G3. And it's a very small, short encounter that players will have with Drow. And then that's when they learn that, we have to go after them. And that's when you jump into the D series, where you go underground against the Drow in their territory. It was not called the Underdark just yet. I don't think it was coined Underdark until 86, 87, something like that, in somebody else's thing. But the layout for these evil society of elves that lived underground happened right here in those modules, and then that story ended with Q1, where players actually took on the demon god Lolth herself. And it was designed that way, to be a big, long campaign. You could also, if you wanted to, start a long campaign with T1, the village of Hamlet, and then move on to the A series, which was Scourge of the Slave Lords, and then jump into D, or rather G, the against the giants. And yeah, it was a big thing. Interestingly, in 1986, they did publish a super module which contained the G series, the D series, and the Q series, which has become the most popular D&D module of all time. And there's a reason for it. It was a very, very good story. But like I said, you could play them individually. I didn't get the individual versions of this. I got the one with 3 modules together. Same with the D modules 1 and 2 were together. And then my D3 is the original old module. Like, this is how they came. This kind of like monochrome thing back in the early days. So these long form campaigns go all the way back to first edition. However, they were done in these separate short 32-page or 62-page modules that in and of themselves were contained adventures. You didn't have to play any of the other adventures in the series, but they were designed to be linked together. So it's an interesting thing. Playing through this whole series from T, A, G, D, and Q is something I have never done and have always wanted to do. It just has this wonderfully grand epic scope that I think was pretty cool, but I never got the chance. Maybe someday. I'm still young enough, right?